morning, everyone. It's lovely to see all of you here, and we have also people joining us through the live stream, so a warm welcome to all of you. And today we will have a very interesting discussion about the Baltic economies. We have a panel of very distinguished experts here with us today. So Mihail Nestor, who is the macroeconomist from SEB Estonia, Dainis Gašpuitis, macroeconomics expert from SEB Latvia, and Tadas Povilauskas, macroeconomist from SEB Lithuania. And today they will sort of dissect and try to open up a few of the myths and misperceptions that are probably lying around about Baltic economies in each of the countries, and to see if they are true or not. So without any further ado, Dainis, the floor is yours.
Good morning, everyone, and it's my pleasure to meet you all here in Riga at SEB premises, and thank you for joining us also via internet. So, some words about origin of this event. Some months ago we met in Tallinn. Michael was hosting that time informal meeting, and we were discussing a lot of things around politics, economy, and social life. It was really interesting for me, and I thought that this is worth to repeat such kind of discussion, but this time also involving broader public and share views that sometimes seems quite similar, but when we talk with people from other countries, they turn out to be quite different. So how we will proceed? This time also we try to find a bit unusual format. So we will give you one presentation, but we will present all three. So we will discuss through slides about things that we found important today to show. That will be in the first half. And in the second half we will give also floor to you. You will be able to give short comments and also raise questions. So here is our agenda. So we will go through general trends, touch upon demography trends. Also, what is very important now is situation in the labor market and also regarding wages. And also touch upon how do we look from the competitiveness point of view. And what is very important now are taxes. So what are the latest trends in all three countries regarding taxes? So let's get starting. So general trends. So when we compare all three countries, we wanted to start with a look on GDP structure of all three countries. So the first conclusions that came up were that Estonians are IT specialists, so Latvians are real estate developers, but Lithuanians turned out best traders. So how do it looks from the Lithuania? So traders is quite large share in your GDP.
Yeah, but that's not the aim. We are willing to see ourselves in the future, in the maybe next decade, as we all understand that low added in trading or in transport segment is rather low compared to IT or financial services or professional services. So maybe it's one of the reasons why we have the lowest average wage in Lithuania, and we have quite high income inequality. So I hope that in the next decade we have a higher share of higher valued industries, but for the moment it's the situation that, as I mentioned, lead to the lower wages and higher shadow economy.
So I think also for Latvia it's quite challenging time when we talk about transit sector, and I think that it is also was that I heard that you are also aiming to increase financial service sector and financial service export.
Yeah, assuming that the shared service centers are expanding in Lithuania quite fastly. It's more than 12,000 of employees are currently working in shared service centers. I don't know the numbers in your countries, but yeah, this sector is expanding quite fastly, and of course, especially in Vilnius, it's one of the reasons why we have a disparity of wages, that wages in Vilnius, in our capital, is increasing very fast, and in other regions, the wages are increasing at the lower pace. But that's again, we all understand that shared service centers need qualified, but at the same time, lower labor costs market. So when our countries will become too expensive for them, it's most likely that the shared service centers will be moved out. So
it's anyway could be temporary.
From my point of view, it's temporary in this decade, but what will happen in the next decade, it depends on us.
Okay, yes. And when we look on Estonia, so we see that you name your IT specialist. So what is behind this share?
The name is very good, IT specialist. That we all like to be. But actually, well, I think Estonian government has been doing quite good in this sense that they have had different commission tenders for the IT sector, which has helped to develop the sector in previous years. And now, as they have got better in their job, they also are able to, export their services outside of Estonia. But I think this is the way forward for all of the pre-Baltic countries.
Yes, that's a thing that I also wanted to underline, that we are here in Latvia struggling to develop public IT services, and I think if we will manage it, it will also boost overall development of IT sector. But what we notice that also this manufacturing share of all three countries in Latvia is the smallest. So how do you see this trend may go? So from your point of view, so it will expand as we are focusing on exports, or will it decrease?
The share of, I think, exports in GDP is the smallest in Latvia. So, but this is one of the reasons. But also, I think for a small country to be a large exporter of goods, this is difficult. I think the future lies in services, because to compete with Germany in terms of exporting high value-added goods, this is very difficult. But selling industrial design, for instance, seems more like the way to go forward.
Yes, and that this could be also difficult to measure, this productivity growth, because if service sector is expanding, it's difficult to measure how productive it is, and therefore it's also a question as when we will talk about wages. So how do you see it? How do you assess? Do we have similar GDP structure and?
Well, as you said, there are some differences, but in broad terms, they're not too large.
Yes, it's from my point of view is also that of course we have three different economies, but with a bit different, let's say, with some differences. The thing that we also want to show is that ECB calculations, that the main conclusion is that despite there are borders from economic point of view where we are very interdependent. So I would like to stress here GDP volume changes, and this is what that shows that our three countries are more interdependent than each of the country with the rest of the Europe. And especially when we talk about wages and unemployment, it means that all of those trends regarding wages and unemployment are very linked, and what is happening in one country sooner or later is also showing results or impacting also other economies.
Yeah, maybe Dennis, a question to you, because we noticed that, let's say, in Lithuania, the economic figures lag Estonia maybe 2 or 3 years. Did you notice such trend that Estonia is somewhere ahead in the economic trend, and we are following the Estonians?
I think
cycles? Yes.
What we noticed that is at least 1.5 year Estonia is an economic cycle ahead of Latvia, and we will touch upon when we will talk about wages and this wage pressure, that especially that Estonia is talking about 2-3 years, and I think we are just arrived. So what is next? Then we also, when we look on all three countries, what is quite surprising, even when we see in our SEB surveys that Lithuanian business is always a bit more positive than other countries. And one question is also to you, Tadas, that when we see that there is investment drop in Latvia and Estonia, we see that investment in Lithuania is growing, so not very fast, but at least growing. No, of course, there is exemption in 2016, but anyway, in previous years, what is behind that? Is it mindset, or is it public policy, or?
No, it was those investments in 2013 and 2015. It were mostly related with our energetic investments, our investments into North-Balt electricity interconnection due to electricity transmission line with Poland. It were very large investments, so we had contrary situation in investments due to compared to Estonia or Latvia. But I think it was the past, and looking to this year, I see that in Latvia and Estonia, when investments are recovering more rapidly compared to Lithuania, and that's one of the issue in Lithuania, that we historically lag in terms of on the investments level. Let's say compared to GDP or other numbers. So that's one of the problems we are facing, and of course private investments are growing at maybe around 10%, but we are still lagging here.
But what we see in the first half of this year, that there is rapid rebound in investment. So in Latvia, at least, is that because of EU funds. So what is in Estonia also behind this rebound?
The case is quite similar in Estonia too, because our private sector has been very active in doing investments for some time already. But actually, this was especially in the case in the construction sector. In the previous years, government tenders have had a huge role in this sector, and now, thanks to the EU funds, which have, the money has returned, the sector is booming. So, I think in the second quarter, Estonian public sector investments rose almost by 50%.
So, and still, government is planning to build houses, or?
Yeah, economists tend not to very much agree with them, because they truly they think that. As our Minister of Economics, I think a few days ago, said that this money, it's nothing for the sector, which they intend to increase there.
But for what purpose they are planning to build? So to rent out, or
they want to build more municipal housing, especially in small towns, which already have very low real estate prices. So this is another reason why economists tend to be skeptical.
So what we can agree on is that in the near term there will be a pickup in investment. So external factors also is boosting export that we see already in the first half of this year. So we can say that economic prospects are brightening. So what we see also that in economic sentiment, that is also increasing in all three countries. And I think it will also, I assume, get even brighter in coming 2-3 years.
If you look at the macroeconomic environment, then in all of our main export countries, Eurozone, the economic climate is forecasted to be very, very good in the next couple of years. And as we all are relatively export-oriented countries, it is hard to do worse than Europe is doing.
So, but despite what we see, that despite this increasing sentiment, we see that overall forecasts are relatively modest, also for Lithuania and Estonia. And how would you comment this near-term future?
I wouldn't name that the growth above 3% is modest growth, because we count that our potential GDP growth is maximum 3% for the longer term. So we are growing at the rate above potential GDP growth. So I would say that.
But the main challenge is that our economy has potential to grow at 3%, but the expectations from society is much higher.
But expectation from society mainly comes regarding other figures, average wages, prices, and so on, and other indicators. But I agree that the short-term outlook is positive, as mentioned, due to external economic factors, and I believe that the decisions from businesses they are cyclical, and when we are majority of businesses, I think, not investing when the times are bad or the times are not so good. They are starting investments, but the times are getting better. So I think that might increase the investments in the following 2 years. So much depends on the investments. If businesses invest, so economy will be growing quite fast. But I think it's the question to the Eurozone that we need the recovery of investments.
So some year ago, I read a lot of briefings from Estonia that you are time by time discussing why the growth is so slow, and so while Latvians are doing better. So now you can be a bit better feeling.
We found out that the growth wasn't that low because if the forecasts aren't too accurate sometimes, then also the statistics sometimes are not very accurate, because we believed that last year the Estonian economy grew by 1.6%, but now they revised the number and now it's 2.1%. So
our worries are gone.
But it's very hard to build your economic policies on the GDP numbers when they tend to change that much.
Okay. So the main question also what we have here is about living standards, when we will reach this EU average, and how many years to go, and so we put this GDP per capita and purchasing power standards. And what is interesting that, and one of my theses is that EU average is not granted for us, and these other countries' examples show. For example, this lowest line shows that, for example, Bulgaria is not converging, let's say, or very, very slowly. Romania is doing a bit better. And what is also, we have to take into account that current convergence is also partly financed by the EU. And this is also a question, for example, and that is interesting to learn, that, for example, Turkey, since the crisis, has the same pattern as Latvia, and of course, for example, that there is arises question: will we get into this middle income trap? Because what we see that, for example, Slovenia is struggling and is, let's say, not converging. It is at the level that it had at least 10 years ago. So the main question is, how do you see what kind of discussions are in your countries? Are you more upbeat, or what is your time frame, and what are expectations?
Well, Lithuania looks very good already now, and they have surpassed Estonia regarding at least GDP per capita in purchase parity standard.
Yes,
this is and it's quite questionable figure for us, because it means that why does it happen? It's because our price level is very, very low compared to Estonia, and but I don't know. If you ask ordinary Lithuania, if the prices are so low compared to Estonia, no one would accept that. But I think that's the effect that public services are much cheaper in Lithuania. I don't know, maybe if it's some kind of a matter of statistics calculations. But when we compare the price level of various goods, we see that statistically, let's say, public services such as health or education is much cheaper in Lithuania. So maybe it's one of the reasons why we have similar GDP per capita because of low price basis.
So, and about the trend, so what are you expecting to reach this EU average, or is this such kind of goal, or what are you focusing on when you talk about such kind of...
The closer you get to the sun, the harder it is to approach it, I think. But, I think the perception in the society is that, yes, we will be there, and maybe not tomorrow, but in 10 to 15 years' time. But if you take the actual numbers, then I would be very happy to see this average level of EU when I'm in my...
In your lifetime?
Yes, when I'm 70.
Okay, by retiring.
Yes.
Okay, so that's again one of the issues that most probably that will be quite topical in our societies, because this convergence may, let's say, stagnate in, let's say, in the medium term, because if we will not manage to solve all those structural reforms and also competitiveness issues that we will talk a bit about later. So, at least here, there is, we wanted a bit to specify, we also like to compare Latvia, at least Latvia, to Estonia, and also there is one of the questions, not as much to reach this EU average, but when we will, or are we able to catch Estonia? So, view from the Estonian.
We made some kind of a back of an envelope calculation that we presume that Estonia's GDP per capita would grow 2% per year, and in Latvia and Lithuania 3%. And in this case, Lithuania would surpass Estonia in 2031 and Latvia in 2038. But this is just on back of an envelope calculation. So in reality, if you look at the recent growth rates of the countries, I guess the growth will be quite similar in all of those countries.
So, and
but as you have a lot of this immigration, so that might help us to
yes, could be
reach
that, at least that
higher
way.
Growth in per capita terms.
And what is a target for Lithuania, or what are you focusing on when you talk about, let's say, standard living standards, and what are you focusing on, or are there such kind of...
We are focusing on Estonia, and we want the same wages as in Estonia or even in Sweden, but I think that it's quite difficult to expect that we may overtake Estonia if we do not make the necessary decision regarding education system reform, regarding the reduction of shadow economy, and so on. So there are much homework to do to overtake Estonia, or even be with you, Latvia. So I think it's a difficult task ahead, but everything is in our hands. And I think it's mission possible to get closer to EU average, but so as the past,
anyway, it will be
but it's
hard work.
It's hard work and maybe a long-term vision.
So the main question also is about inflation. So we get, at least society get used to very, let's say, low inflation, and now this acceleration in inflation is also, let's say, creating some kind of unrest in, at least in media, that prices are rising, but despite this, that our forecasts point regarding moderate inflation. So at least what I can say, that our forecasts are based on broader view, that our group sees that there will, at least for 2-3 years, there will be low inflation environment globally, and that's why we are expecting that also inflation in all 3 countries will be relatively low. Of course, the main question is how rapid, how fast inflation will be in the service sectors, Or what can you comment on regarding inflation forecasts?
Yeah, I assume that the largest part of inflation increase comes from the increasing of average wages, and that naturally influences the price of services. But for example, in Lithuania, what we see that Phillips curve is working quite nicely, and we see that the drop of unemployment is naturally influencing the price level. And of course, I maybe one of the unknown factor, let's say, for the next and for the 2019 year is the administrative prices, because in Lithuania and Estonia, I think 1 percentage point of inflation came from higher excise duties for alcohol, so it's I don't know what are the forecasts or the possible decisions for the next and for the 2019 regarding taxes, but of course, if the average wages will be growing at a similar pace and we have some increases in the administrative prices, so we would likely have inflation of 3% or even higher.
So we have quite similar. So what is you from Estonia?
Yeah, I think the story is quite the same in all of the Baltics countries. That the surge in excise duties has had an influence. The changes in energy prices. So we are more of a price takers in the global market.
And about these price levels that we, at least from Latvian point of view, we don't like to see is that despite Lithuanians are ahead in GDP per capita, so we are ahead at price levels. In my view is that also that this is also part of a Riga effect, that Riga is setting the price level, and also this also sets that why we are higher price level, at least in Lithuania, but what we see and notice that price level in Poland is much lower than in all three Baltic states. How Lithuania is feeling this pressure, because I think this is also quite topic issue in Lithuania. So many Lithuanians still go shopping to Poland. Yeah,
Lithuania feels the pressure of Poland because south of the residents of southern Lithuania, we usually go to Poland for shopping, and I don't know what we can do, because Poland is I think one of the cheapest country in European Union, both due to its taxing policy, lower VAT rate, much support to the agricultural producers. Also, it has the positive effect from its large population size. So, of course, it creates much competition in the retail market. But I think it's a difficult task to overtake Poland with its price levels, and the prices are low because of flexible exchange rate. Because we see that when the exchange rate weakens, so more purchases will take place in Poland from Lithuania. But when we compare the countries, let's say Lithuania, Latvia, and Estonia, I think that current price level in Lithuania is normal if you assume that our average wages is lower compared to Latvia and Estonia. So it's natural that we have a slightly lower price level.
But a bit quite opposite effect also from Finland. So you are benefiting from lower prices despite
yes, actually it's claimed that around 40% of alcohol bought in Estonia actually is bought by the Finns. So yes, low prices have been an advantage to ourselves, and well, now with the increase in excise duties, some are afraid that this will not continue, but we will talk about the taxes later on.
Okay. So let's move on. So, demography that we already touched upon, and we would like to start with the graphs that shows that these demographic problems are not solely seen in all 3 Baltic countries, but this is a problem for all Eastern Europe. But of course, we see also problems with demography also in Eastern Germany. So, but so yes, I think. The worst situation is not as much with this aging and negative birth rate, but with immigration. So
yeah, and when you see that in Latvia or Lithuania we have lost around 20% of residents in the 15 years period, so it's a real problem. And let's see, one of the unanswered question is why the emigration increased in Lithuania in the last 2 years when the economic situation was improving. So,
what are the guesses? What are the reasons behind the emigration?
There are several guesses. The first one, of course, we have still much lower wage compared to Western Europe. The second guess is that the families which established themselves, let's say in the UK, they are inviting their relatives to come to the UK, and relatives, children, other family members to come to UK. We think also that Brexit had an temporary effect, that those people who wanted to emigrate, they were hurrying. Of course, some
due to Brexit.
Yeah, and but I still hope that these changes will be more positive in the following years. And I want to hear from Michael from Estonia. What are you doing that you have a positive migration balance?
What is behind this?
Well,
what magic?
Estonia has a luxury to be living very close to Finland, which is 80 kilometers by boat, which has a very similar language. So many of the Estonians who have emigrated, they might be working in Finland, but they come back for the weekend. So this is not a permanent immigration, but instead in Latvia and Lithuania, you don't have that kind of a country where it's very easy to go to. So you go to UK, which is further away, and well, I couldn't imagine living in London and coming back for every weekend to Riga, for instance.
But could it be linked with the problems in Finnish economy, and
yes,
if situation now improves?
This reversal in trend surely is related to the Finnish labor market. So Estonia's unemployment rate has been for some time much lower than it's in Finland. And as the wage level has been increasing with a quite fast pace, so it might be beneficial even to live in Estonia instead of Finland.
And could it be that average wages already reached that level that is not anymore interested to go and find a job?
Well, the wage level and also the price level. So real estate, the average cost of living. So I think those are all which has influenced people to come back.
Yeah, and despite this, that I think that the main problem is that our internal market is shrinking and will shrink. That the main pressure will come from also shrinking Latvian and Lithuanian market, and also that they're also talking for a while, and I think we will talk for at least many years on that. Our entrepreneurs should focus more on exports, because local market will shrink, and of course there will be difference regarding regions, and most probably Riga region and some regions as Valmiera, Liepāja, they will see increase in population, but I think that overall number of inhabitants in Latvia will decrease. So what kind of regions will prosper in Lithuania? Or there will be equal decrease in population in all regions?
As you showed the first slide about the population developments in Europe, I think it's the same tendency in Lithuania and maybe in your, as you mentioned, in your countries, that people are moving to the largest cities. And in case in Lithuania, it's of course, let's say, the population of Vilnius, it is still increasing, and the population in the rest of Lithuania is sharply decreasing. But I think it's, if current demographic trend remains and we still have a negative migration, I think it's just a question of time when Vilnius will also start losing its population. But at the moment, yeah, the situation is quite favorable for Vilnius, and people are still moving to our capital. So that's why we have a quite strong real estate market and so on and so on. But I think it's a question of time.
But I have a very hypothetical question to you. But let's say that Brexit process will end up in terms that it's impossible for EU citizens to move there anymore. So what do you think? Will this end the immigration process in Latvia or Lithuania, or those people instead turn to another country, for instance, Germany?
Yes, I don't think that Germany will be the next country, but 2 weeks ago I met a guy that he went to UK 13 years ago, and he said that he's considering to leave UK because he says that there is no more that UK that he went, and he is planning to move to Canada. So I think those who are already there and who are planning to leave country, they will go. So I don't know what Scandinavia, what we see that construction workers are going to Scandinavia, at least near term we see that, and what our Swedish colleagues say that construction service is booming and overheating, meaning there is increasing demand for constructor workers, meaning that those who went 2 years ago, 1 year ago, due to lack of EU funds, they will not return because they have a lot of job there. Many, of course, will go Canada or US or Australia or even maybe Germany, but I don't think that Germany will be the main country. But one thing I wanted to also ask is, we also like to, at least in different kind of discussions, to blame country and politicians when people are leaving country. Is the same in Lithuania? So, and could you comment? Is this that you are better? Politics, policy.
Well, this is a very big problem for Estonian politicians that we have a positive migration rate, because before that it used to be a big slogan on elections that we will stop this immigration and Estonian people will come back to Estonia. But now they don't have any more that card to play out. So. But maybe they have done such a good job that now everybody came back, you know.
So,
yeah, of course, the government is the first to blame of everything, and I would name that one of the cause of emigration. I don't know how it's in EU and Latvia, but I would name as the lack of some kind of vision of the country, where the country is heading,
prospects of economy,
and the health, the psychological health of a society is not very normal. I think it's ill our society. So I don't know if it is the task for the government or for us that somehow to improve our beliefs on our economies.
Mm-hmm. When we talk about history, the same situation was in Scandinavia when 20 and even more share of population left Scandinavian countries, northern countries, and left to US, where the growth and economic prospects were brighter. I think we are in the same situation. There is no huge hurdles to leave the country, but economic prospects in other countries are better than in our countries. Also, I think this is also part of the historical process that most probably we cannot stop mechanically, that we just need to go through it. So now about labor markets. So one thing is that we know for sure that unemployment slowly but decrease further, because at least we are talking that there is already this natural level of unemployment. But what we see that this is quite different picture in Estonia, that we see that unemployment is increasing. So what's wrong with Estonia?
Well, in recent years, Estonia has been ahead of Latvia and Lithuania in those terms, that we've had much lower unemployment level. But some might say that we have had such as you could call it a hidden unemployment. So in Estonia, there are around 100,000 people who have received some kind of a disability pension. So usually there are people who have done physical work and now there is something wrong with their health. They are not able to do that same job. They live in some remote area of Estonia outside of the capital, where it's very hard to find another workplace. So instead, they have been given this disability pension. But now the government is pursuing a large reform called a workability reform, which will try to bring at least some of those people back to the labor market. But as it's very hard, you know, to get people from remote areas who are used to physical work into the service sector, for instance, then at least in the beginning of that reform, we will have some temporary increase in unemployment rates. So it will have an influence on the labor force survey, which Statistics Office is conducting.
But how do you assess, is this positively this reform, and what are the perception?
At the moment, it is for Estonian companies very hard to find available workers. So yes, we have to use every source we can, and this cannot be considered to be normal that we have 100,000 people who receive this disability pension, which is very low, and they're not able to fulfill their dreams in the labor market.
At least part-time job.
Yes, it has drawn lots of criticism, but I think the goals of the reform are right.
I think yes. I think at least in Latvia we will not be able to avoid such kind of review of benefits, system of benefits, and so. But what about system unemployment comments?
I agree with you, but we will have to follow Estonia in this matter, because in Lithuania there are 200 disabled people who are receiving disability pensions, and just 50,000 of them are working. So it means that 150,000 are not in the labor market, and of course not of them are able to work, but it's the task of our society to introduce them into the labor market, assuming that the businesses are lacking both skilled and unskilled labor. So personally, I think that the question of immigration of the persons from a third country, meaning from Ukraine or Belarus, is really a very close future for us.
So, but you said that already there are already Ukrainians coming to specific sectors.
Yeah, of course.
But it's already creating some kind of, let's say, discussion within society, or
no, at the moment, because maybe a majority of persons from Ukraine are working as truck drivers in our road transportation companies, so we are driving in Western Europe, and nobody in Lithuania sees them. So, but when the service sector, let's say hotels, maybe restaurants, coffees, will start employing people from Ukraine, it might increase. The questions of in the society regarding these persons might arise, but I think that we cannot avoid this trend.
Yes, I think so. That selective and smart immigration policy is necessary for our country. So the main problem is that to find this balance where it is, and I think that we will not avoid due to this demographic situation that you saw.
Because historically, it's just a history that almost every one country that is developing into the next stage, and let's say fewer and fewer people are willing to work work at for the small wages. So you need to increase immigration.
So yes, and you
at
can
balanced ways.
Yes, you can compare the wages, and one of the things and one of the theses that I want to say that most probably this 1,000 euros net is enough to stop immigration. So with this kind of growth, we can be there within 3 years. So it may be the time when immigration can stop. And what are your views on that? And Mikkel, especially one question is that how you are dealing and how business is dealing with this increasing wage pressure that I already mentioned, that you are talking about at least 2-3 years. So what are the consequences and what are the cure? Are you taking or not taking, or what are you?
Well, this really has been discussed a lot in Estonia, that as in recent years the profits of the business sector have not grown or even decreased, or the growth has been very small, then the wage growth has been quite large. And this has happened thanks to the fact that some companies have postponed their investments or decreased their expectations for profits. But now, with the higher economic growth, we have seen also that the business sector profits are again getting back to the normal levels. So
there is some kind of relief.
No, it has really happened now. So the situation isn't that critical as it used to be. But I guess, well, companies, they tend to complain, but at the time when we have an unemployment level of 6%, this is a very good time to have this wage pressure, because this is also a trigger for the companies to try to create more value.
Yes, and we already touched upon that overall situation in Europe, that despite when we focus on EU, that we can say that cheapest labor force is, at least Lithuania, when we see in the Baltic comparison, but also, let's say, even Estonia is not the most expensive labor force.
Yeah. Well, I think all of our countries have way forward to develop in terms of wages.
So we hope with this increase in investment, this growth in productivity will also rise, and of course we see that this unit labor cost is pressure is quite clear. So then we come to the question of competitiveness, and this competitiveness is also that thing that we will need to solve. And of course that is very valuable to see and hear how Estonians are doing, as we also notice that not always, but almost always, they are ahead of us. So, Mikkel.
Yeah, we discussed how to talk about competitiveness, so it wouldn't be just in pure economic terms, but also take into account the social development of a country. So here we're actually using this competitiveness ranking, which is compiled by the World Economic Forum, so which takes into account a huge number of different indicators. So, and we highlighted just few of them, where maybe the differences are the biggest ones. So, for instance, Estonia is far before Latvia and Lithuania in terms of the quality of institutions. And when I was checking those sub-indicators there, well, one of the things is that Estonians tend to trust their institutions a lot more. I don't know what might be the reason why, for instance, Latvians don't trust their institutions.
It's of course complicated answer, but it's all related with these political trends, and also with this trust in police, trust in judicial system, and also it's all forming that their overall trust in institutions is quite low. Of course, we are increasing efforts to improve, but of course these improvements are not as fast as we would like to see.
And maybe I would add that one of the reasons why Estonia is ahead of us in the sector of institutions, it's maybe that you are providing more services electronically and it is much easier for the people to get the services by electronical in an electronical way. And in Lithuania, I think it's maybe the situation is improving, but it's still the problem of nepotism, of briberies, because we have. But of course, it's not the similar story among the institutions. Let's say in police, recent surveys demonstrate that the bribing in police has almost vanished. But we, let's say, have the large problem in the healthcare sector. So it's not the unified situation, but
yeah. Because you could see also from here that in healthcare and education, Estonia has a significant lead. And well, other indicator which I checked was that what is the share of higher education graduates in these scientific or technical fields. And well, this is, I think, one of those competitive advantages nowadays. A country wants to have a large pool of people with a degree in engineering or IT and so on. So this
you are better to meet current new type of economics or development trends.
Yeah, but compared to Germany, for instance, where the share is 37%, the significance with Latvia or Lithuania is nothing.
So what are the cure? What would she do?
But I don't know how about Latvia and Lithuania, but at least in Estonia, for instance, IT has become a very popular thing to study. So what is the situation here?
We are trying to promote and struggling to get results, but of course this is a trend that we want to, let's say, continue.
Because at the moment, well, if you have studied IT, then you don't even have to graduate university to get a very good job, usually. Well, and another thing I wanted to maybe discuss a bit is this last ones, the business sophistication and the innovation. So another indicator which tells a story is this spending on research and development in our countries per inhabitant. So this seemed especially low in Latvia, but is this the case that you don't have companies don't want to spend money on R&D, or what is the company's profile that much different that they don't need to spend the money on R&D?
This is a very good question, and that's an issue that I want to raise also when we are talking about surveys that we are carrying out, for example, ACB, and we see that the share of companies, even middle and small enterprises, and also these larger companies, the share, those who want to innovate, is constantly lower when we compare with Lithuania and Estonia. So even our surveys show that we are still not, let's say, evaluating this, that we need to spend more on research and development, on innovation. Another thing could be also the share of FDI and share of large companies, because what we know and that easier to invest in research and development are for larger companies, and we see that Estonia is doing better attracting FDI, and Lithuania, of course, have more bigger companies, and therefore could be this explained this graph. But of course, this when we compare this EU, it means that we need to think how to increase this spending, because without it I don't think that there is future, at least reach ambitions to get this EU average, because this is the EU average when we talk about living standards. So, and our final story is about taxes. It's a bit. I thought it could be quite boring, but when we gathered information, at least from Estonia and Lithuania, and put together, it was really interesting to see how, at least this how our reform looks like. So to be sure that we are introducing a progressive tax income system. In reality, I would say this is relatively flat. And also we are trying to replicate Estonian system with zero tax rate on reinvested profits and rising tax rate for dividends to 20%. So that's in short, and I would like to give a view what is Estonia planning, and then we will hear what is Lithuania is planning, and then we can compare how does our system looks like on the comparing in that comparison.
Well, I think the most discussed reform in Estonia right now is this huge surge in tax-exempt minimum to 500 euros from 180 right now. But it will just not be for as 500 euros, but it will be diminishing in time. Sorry, not in time, but with incomes. So the higher your income, the lower the tax-exempt minimum, and for very high wages, actually, next year they will start. They will lose some money on taxes from that.
So the progressivity is there. So you are implementing
like
more
progressive tax-exempt minimum, but at the same time, in Estonian politics, having a progressive income tax has been really a taboo. So nobody dares to actually promise a progressive income tax because this is considered to be too socialist, let's say. So this is one of the big changes. And also, well, Estonia has been a bit different from many countries that we tax corporate profits not when they are earned, but when they are distributed. And as the rate of 20% has been quite high compared to many other countries, then many companies sit on a pile of money, which was very good maybe on times of crisis, but now the government thinks that maybe it would be better if they could get some tax returns from there earlier, and also some companies try to be creative, moving out this money from the company without paying out dividends.
So it's quite interesting to learn that we are following your example, and now you are trying to follow our example. So you are trying to decrease from 20% to 40% because to be a bit more competitive comparing to us, but that's not the case anymore. So we are trying. So
our government should somehow, coordinate their possible tax changes. There wouldn't be so much need to do things differently all the time.
So the main thing to just elaborate, so there will be a decrease from 20 to 14%, and for some regimes there will be still 20%, yeah?
Yeah, if your dividend payouts are irregular.
Mm-hmm.
And well, what concerns finance sector is this advanced taxation. So finance sector will be taxed already for earned profits, but sorry, there's my mistake on the slide. That's actually 14% then the rate.
Mm-hmm. So and still, despite you have advantage regarding excise taxes, and many Finns are going to buy alcohol, but you are still trying to rise excise tax, and Finns are not happy with that, so they are planning to.
Yeah, the Finns have also planning some reforms of their current alcohol taxation system. So actually, nobody is too sure how it will end. But the alcohol producers and sellers are very critical concerning those surges in excise duties.
So when I was in Estonia, first question I got in SEB premises when we will raise excise tax. Yes.
Yes.
So
and it has been a lot discussed how now some Estonians go to Latvia to buy their alcohol, but yeah, in a very broad macro picture, this is just a drop in the sea.
So the trend is similar, and what we can conclude that also you are also watching what we are doing in
not too closely as
yes, yeah, not following each other as it could be necessary. So and bit about what Lithuanians are planning. So there are a lot of interesting things.
But first I would like to mention that these proposals are just from government, and they have to be approved in the parliament in the autumn. It's most likely that not all of these proposals will be confirmed. And I would agree that we are moving to more progressivity, because it's a natural answer to such problems as income inequality, as comparably large taxing on low earners. So our government is willing to reduce taxing wedge on low earners, and we have the same system as Estonia is preparing regarding personal income, because we have a progressive tax exempt amount, and we are willing to equal this sum to the minimum monthly wage. So when monthly minimum wage is increasing, we are increasing the maximum tax exempt amount.
There will be no income tax on minimum wage.
Yeah, that's right. And speaking about the corporate income taxing, we are not following Estonia and Latvia. We're still planning to tax the earned profits, not distributed, and we are going in such a way that we are supporting those companies who are investing, because let's say if you are investing in certain investments, you can reduce your taxable net profit. We think that it's...
but is it focused on specific sectors or
No, just if you are investing, let's say, in the new equipment, you can reduce your taxable amount by this investment. So our government, and I agree that maybe it's more not efficient, but definite measure to increase the investments. But it's quite complex to count what the investments were made, and it's quite difficult for businessmen. So it's more easier to have the system as you're planning, or Estonia has, let's say, to promoting investments. But I think that Lithuania still is attractive for those companies who are paying out dividends. We have a 15% corporate income tax.
So it turns out that we will not be attractive for companies, especially those with foreign capital who are investing and with the purpose to receive regular dividends. So in that perspective, will not be very attractive.
Latvia. I think you will be more attractive for investing companies because, let's say if you are a financial, let's say you are providing professional services, so it means that most likely you are not doing investments into tangible assets. So it means that if you are a service company and you are investing, it's better to have your system than just distributed profits are taxed. So I think that from my point of view is that for the companies, for the investing companies, it's better to have the taxing system as it is in Estonia and Latvia.
So, and you are also planning to increase excise taxes, and a bit what are...
Yeah, we are planning to have some changes in the VAT, in reduced VAT ratio rate from 9 to 15%, but I think it is minor. It will be minor changes.
Yes, and you can see this, let's say, short summary of potential tax systems in all 3 Baltic countries, and I think with this slide we can also conclude our performance and also give floor to you, and you can also ask, raise questions or give comments regarding what you heard, or let's say, we can clarify what we want to.
Maybe I will ask.
Yes.
My first question. Let's say because we are starting the discussions regarding minimum monthly wage in Lithuania, and we see that you are doing a really sharp increase in minimum wages by 50 euros. So my question is how businesses accept such a high increase in minimum wages, and what are your expectations about possible effect on businesses and on inflation?
It's quite a hot topic here, and what we see that entrepreneurs are resisting this, and it's mostly a political thing. And what we see, it's, this trend is global. We see that as wage growth is relatively slow, that government steps in and tries to increase at least minimum wage, and somehow trying with administrative instruments push up wages. I think that is also such a rapid increase in minimum wage is not very, let's say, healthy, at least in regions where this average wage is already very low. For example, for Riga it could be even a bit higher, but for regions it's already quite high. So questions maybe from the audience? Yes?
I have a question about Lithuanian tax reform. It says that tax-exempt amount for dependents will be cancelled, and it will be, I understand, replaced with child allowances. Is that correct?
Yeah, because we have a tax amount of 200 per child. So it means that if it is 15% PIT rate, so you can get 30 euros per child. So the change would be that the state would directly pay 30 euros child allowance sum. So it's a 0-0 game, but it's better for those families who are, let's say, the parents are not working. So if you are not working, you cannot use the tax amount. So it's some measure to help the
to decrease inequality.
Yeah, to decrease inequality.
But also they will increase this allowance by having third child.
Yeah, the benefit would be a little bit higher if you have a third child and if your incomes are below the minimum level.
So I think also this we will have to deal with, at least what we see that regarding current tax system, these problems are not solved. So I think we will also adjust our tax system, at least taking into account the examples what we can take, in my opinion. Yep.
Yeah, exactly. If you want to solve social inequality, the tax system alone does not provide all the answers.
Yes.
What Lithuanians are doing is the right.
Right.
But I think that 30 euros, I think this sum will naturally increase because it's really a poor sum.
Maybe just as an encouragement that you can ask also questions not about tax system, but
yes,
about all the topics we've discussed before.
And beyond it.
And beyond it.
Yeah. Yep.
I recently saw numbers that in the housing market, new apartments built in, for example, Riga, Vilnius, and Tallinn, the numbers are quite different. And while Riga is the most populated city, the number of new apartments in Riga is the smallest one. And so my question for you is, what, in your opinion, are the drivers for this? And do you expect that in the next few years the situation will change? You know, this whole construction industry and optimistic views of population on economy.
In case of Estonia, I think one of the reasons the numbers are higher in Estonia is that our labor market has in previous years been performing better. So might be that the confidence has been higher, and this has been driving the market. And well, just before the event, we were discussing the trends in population. So if in the end of the 80s, the number of children born was the highest in Estonia, around 25,000, then in I think in 1994 it was already 12,000. So now those large generations are getting 30 or about that, so they are now buying their first apartments. So I think today and in a few years' time, this is the best time in the real estate market. But after that, nobody knows.
For constructors best and for lenders, because afterwards demand may decrease.
Yes.
I would say that similar situation as Michael told about the demographics happen in Lithuania, because we have a peak of around 30 years age population which are buying the first flat. And of course, what we are noticing that especially in Vilnius, there is quite sharp increase in the average wages among the persons with age of 25 to 35. So both the two with shared service centers, so they are earning more, and they can afford to buy a new apartment. So yeah, we saw that especially, I think that last year it was a peak for the new apartments deals. This year the numbers are slightly lower, but we still have really pretty good numbers for the new apartments buildings and transactions. And looking forward, I would say that.
But is it true that 80% of activity is in Vilnius region?
Yeah, of course. And what we are maybe noticing that more and more persons are buying the second flat for the renting out. But what is it positive that contrary to pre-crisis times, majority of such purchases of second flat is done from own money, not from the loans, and it's counted that 1/3 of the new apartments are bought for the investments and for the renting, because there is still a lack for the apartments to rent in Vilnius.
So there, and also this number of inhabitants is rising rapidly. So demand is quite hot, and it's a bit different from Riga, where this, at least for the last year, this number of population is only stabilizing. And of course, Riga neighborhoods are booming, but I think it's.
And once another trend, I know maybe it's similar in Tallinn or Riga, is that temporary rent, let's say through an Airbnb and Booking.com is getting more and more popular, and people buying an apartment and renting it out for the short-term rent for the tourists, because the number of tourists to Vilnius is increasing at rather nice pace. So it's still an attractive investment idea.
Yeah, but as you said, probably the decline in population will also one time be in Vilnius. So
it could be. It's not.
Of course. I think that
this growth will stop, or
I think that the peak in the new apartments transaction, it was last year. I think this year we will have lower numbers, and most likely that next year.
But if the
it won't be a historical record year, but it will be more or less normal years.
So if these numbers are the lowest, so it reflects lower confidence of the population in general?
We see that, yes, this confidence is, despite affordability, has risen a lot. Even comparing pre-crisis levels, we see that this confidence is still very low. And we see also that currently this autumn program is the main driver of demand, meaning that there is also, comparing to Estonia, where households are a bit richer with their deposits, our households do not have such savings. And I think it's also, slowing down. And another is that, of course, you saw in the first graph that we are still focused a lot of on real estate market. It was before crisis, and still this because can be explained by this sharp drop in GDP numbers, and therefore I think this crisis effect is still can be felt, because I think we are temporarily just coming out from this.
We actually have one question from our viewers through the live stream. So it's a question for, so Estonia has boosted the child benefit for families with 3 or more children. And also Estonia plans to rise the non-taxable minimum for low incomes. Do you expect that these measures will boost the consumption?
Yes, for the next year, definitely. So we are quite optimistic about the surge in private consumption. Especially this increase in tax-exempt minimum will have a huge effect.
Yep.
Well, there are some discussions on the possible overheating in the labor market in case of Latvia, with the unemployment rate being close to or below the national rate of employment, and the productivity wage gap, I mean the wage growth being faster than the productivity growth. Is the situation similar in Lithuania and Estonia, and would you consider it a sign of economy entering a boom phase?
Well, I guess the wage growth has been even faster in Lithuania and Estonia than in Latvia, and also the unemployment levels are very low. But well, the natural rate of unemployment tends to change also with different economic conditions. So if we will have a long period of very low unemployment, then also the natural rate goes down, which is also, it has logic in it, because people get better in their jobs. So at the moment, as we see that also the profits of the business sector are on the rise, so the concern isn't maybe as imminent as it used to be, or
yes.
What do you think?
I think now it was pressure for higher wages, but now we see with this better economic activity, entrepreneurs will be able also to meet this demand. But of course, we already discussed that in part it's also necessary to rise to stop this immigration, because demand for higher wages, at least what we see, this net wage of 1,000 euros in surveys also in Lithuania is necessary to reach. Then we can also then start to think how to, let's say to find other measures to solve this problem, because what we also notice that with this service development, it's also difficult to measure changes in productivity, and it's a global issue. We see that this productivity growth is very slow all over the world. So I think we hope with this increase in investment it will also a bit accelerate. But generally I think in the near term this productivity growth will be lower than wage growth. So I think this is also part of the story with this relationship between employees and employers. How to share this, because I think it's also a discussion that how much employer is ready to pay for their employees.
For instance, the very popular belief in Estonia is that the employers are paying too little for their employees and just having all the profits for themselves. But actually, when you take the share of labor costs in GDP, then we are far above of the level of some richer countries.
Yeah, but sometimes there is no other options.
Yeah, and I would agree that in case of Lithuania, we are most likely below the natural unemployment rate, because the increasing inflation indicates that we are already below this level. And does it indicate about the overheating of the labor market and economy? I would say that we are in the late growth stage. That when the economy is growing and when the demand is growing, and especially external demand is growing, so we have natural effects that unemployment is really low. But everything, I think, depends on how external markets, let's say Eurozone, how it will be living in the next several years. And I would say that productivity again it is cyclical feature. Let's say I think that when we see that Estonia is growing at 5.5% of GDP, so its productivity most likely improved by 7%, maybe. So when you see that the productivity growth is almost equal with average wages, so that's again we may see that the productivity will also increase this and next year, and both due to investments. That I think. Regarding Lithuania, I think almost every business now understand that. But looking forward, you will see that there will be a lack of employers because many people left country. So either you invest or upgrade your processes, either you will have serious problems.
With the Baltic wage levels, I think in today's environment, having this wage pressure is a good thing.
Yeah, and maybe it's how to say it's also it's destructive, but it's at the same time constructive because it's.
Well, some sectors need to close their doors because they're not competitive enough.
Yeah, as I read that some foreign companies are leaving country because of too high wages.
Yeah, in the beginning of the last year, there was a story that one large company who produced different cables said that they will close their manufacturing operations in Estonia, but their sales team, for instance, who's selling to Brazil and such exotic countries, stayed in Estonia, for instance. And this is, I think, a very natural way in this economic development. So those low-paying manufacturing jobs have to leave to raise our living standards.
But I repeat my first sentence that we are lagging Estonia by several years because that company moved the plant to Lithuania.
I didn't want to mention that, you know. Yeah, but it's true.
Yep.
If we go deeper into this discussion about wages, then okay, I understand that the general concern is not that big, but if we look at different industries, we know about in Latvia this is construction industry. In the next few years, do you see some particular industries where this could be a problem within the next few years? This wage increase.
Well, if you mentioned the construction sector, then in broader terms that might be a problem. So we all know what happened 10 years ago when there was a construction boom. So every willing young man went to work for the construction company. So we don't want to see that happening again.
Yes, and that's, I think, one of the risks that, okay, we can assume that less competitive companies will close and labor force will move more towards more, let's say, competitive companies. But it could be also the case that they move where the wages are higher, and wages are higher in sectors where this overheating may occur, and it may cause a bit also imbalances also in the labor market, as Mikael told that if there will be demand, so many will move to construction service, or at least will not decide to study or something, that it also a bit makes some risks that this outcome may not be as good as we want now.
Because it seems that the demand in the construction sector will be huge in coming years, and if the wages go up, this is a very good trigger for people to move, for instance, from exporting companies to the construction companies, which in terms of long-term growth isn't that good.
Therefore, there are, of course, risks in that sense, because I think that there are not every employees, let's say, dedicated to specific sector, that they can also change sectors, and the main problem is that not to create huge bubbles. No, any other questions? So then I think we can also close this formal part and continue discussions in more informal environment. Thank you for being with us in our discussion. I think that we learned a lot from all three countries and found what is similar and differences. And if there are questions, then you also find on our website this presentation, and in the end there are our emails, and then you can email us and we will answer or clarify our answers. Thank you.
Thank you.